Can everyone give our folks at home who are, I know a few folks reached out to me and they're kind of bummed they couldn't make it. So can we give them like a whole lot of energy so they can feel it through the phone, however you want. Nicely done. Like we didn't even legit rehearse that.
We did not legit rehearse.
That is
we have legit rehearsed actually very little of our work together.
Hello,
to
my
be very,
darling.
very
Hello, my
clear.
baby.
Yeah. So we are going to have a couple of last remarks in the formal portion of the program.
Yeah.
I know you are going to be talking with Senator Mark Warner in just a few moments, which will be amazing and awesome.
I snuck it in on the side. It's
oh,
already
you did?
done,
So
Lady
it's already
Jane.
done?
Yep, we're good.
She is so good.
I am.
Isn't
Didn't even
she?
blink. Don't blink.
Yeah,
you never know what I'm up to.
There we go. Can we also thank our sponsors today? They are listed in your program, but you know, these kinds of events do not come off without sponsors because somebody's got to pay for the croissant, right? So, and all of the nifty things you have here today. And so that is amazing. And so thank you to all of our sponsors. I'm very privileged to be one of your sponsors today. So if your plans call for a facilitator, an MC, or a keynote speaker, roll on over to kathylewis.com. There are some older pictures of me where I'm much thinner, but we're working on getting that changed. But there will be a vague sense of familiarity. So that's how you'll know. That's how you'll know when you get there.
I'm going to sneak off because you're
right?
not doing
Okay.
serious stuff.
Okay,
I'm
goodbye.
just hanging out.
Would you join me in
Do a
thanking
moonwalk?
Becky Freemall?
Bye, guys. Oh, hey.
Okay, here
Hold
we
on.
go. So anyway, it's just been amazing. Oh, yeah, could you leave that?
Senator Warner might need that.
That would be grand. Okay. So you know how kids collect, anybody here's kids collect like Pokemon cards or baseball cards, or anybody get in trouble for throwing out a collection of baseball cards? Apparently that's a grave offense. So after we were together this morning, I got kind of taken by this whole entrepreneurial idea, and I am a political nerd, total nerd. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we had like baseball cards except for elected officials, right? Okay, am I the only one who would love that? Okay, I might be. That might be why. Well, there actually is someone who has done that. I thought I had a great idea, and I was going to go to the resource fair and get it all locked down so that when I walked out of here today, I'd have a going business concern, but apparently someone has beaten me to it. So I am really going to see if I can buy several Congresswoman Jen McClellan cards from this company that's doing it. Now, one would be to keep for myself, of course, but I would give extras away so that others can get to know this amazing representative who means so much to the people of the 4th District and indeed to all Virginians. Congresswoman McClellan is a lifelong Virginian and a dedicated public servant of the people. She served in the Virginia House of Delegates for more than 10 years, and then in the Virginia Senate for 6 years until she was elected by the people of the 4th to represent them in Congress. Her legislative record is fulsome, and yeah, you can applaud for that. That's lovely. Yeah. Her legislative record is fulsome and meaningful, more than 370 pieces of legislation. And we are not talking about naming buildings after people, although that's a good thing. So if a bill comes in, Congresswoman, that has my name on it, I want you to go ahead and sign that and take care of it. But we are talking about real landmark legislation, like protecting and expanding voting rights, combating climate change, preserving reproductive health care, and enhancing worker protections. These are the kinds of pieces of legislation that hit home for all of us every day. Congresswoman McClellan and her husband and 2 children live in Richmond. And I'm gonna tell you something, if you want a real treat, follow her on Facebook, where you will not only learn about the great work she's doing, but you will get to see her family's Halloween costuming. And I'm just going to say, the whole family commits. They are in it to win it. So please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Jen McClellan. So much. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, it is a pleasure to be back in Roanoke, and particularly back in Roanoke for one of Senator Warner's women's conferences. The last time we were here, or that I was here for a conference in Roanoke, I had my whole family and my daughter, who was, I think, 6 months old at the time. And I feel a little bit old because now she's 9 and going on 29, trying to take over the world. I thought about bringing her with me, but she would run up on this stage and upstage her mom. And I said, you know what? You can stay at home today. But just walking into this room, I feel a wave of joy and empowerment and excitement that I wasn't sure I would feel. And we know that November has been tough for many of us. I know this is an official side event, but I think it's safe to say for a lot of people, November was a little bit tough. And November marked we're almost to the end of my first term as a member of Congress, where I never thought I would be. And as I reflect back on my first year, and I reflect on what is now an almost 20-year public service career, I'm reminded of what got me interested in government and politics to begin with. And I thought I would share very briefly that with you because it is a love of history and being a proud nerd that got me where I am today. I grew up listening to my parents tell stories of what their life was like growing up in the segregated South under Jim Crow, growing up in the midst of the Depression. My dad born in 1925, my mom in 1932. I was the oops baby. And they saw the best of government through the New Deal and the Great Society, and they saw the worst of government through Jim Crow. And that sparked a love of history. And the more I read, I knew I wanted to make an impact on my community somehow. They were both educators. They were both very active in the community. My dad was also a pastor. So I had no choice but to be involved in the community in a way that would improve it. And the more I learned, the more I came to understand that government can be a powerful force for change. And that at its best, it helps people and solve problems. And at its worst, it oppresses some for the benefit of a few. So I decided at 11 that I wanted to be a part of making government that force for good. Now, I didn't know what that meant at 11. Then I thought it meant getting other people elected to make the change. And when I first met Senator Warner, and there's a little joke between us as to when exactly that was, but I'm starting to like his version better because I was younger every time he tells the story. I thought, I'm going to work to get other people elected that I know or hope will make the change. And I thought my path, I went to law school wanting to be a lawyer to a congressional committee. Now, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. So while I was in law school, Republicans took over. I'm a Democrat. I was like, I don't want to work for them. So I went to UVA, and there everybody goes the law firm track. So I ended up at a law firm practicing law and volunteering on the side in every election since I was 18 years old to get other people elected. It wasn't until my delegate, a woman, a black woman, called me. She was running for lieutenant governor, Viola Baskerville, and she said, do you think you might ever want to run for office? I said, yeah, one day, after I get married, after I have kids, after I make money, then maybe. And she said, that day is now. So, okay. So I ran for office against someone who was the hand-picked candidate of our then mayor, former governor, Doug Wilder, talking about my vision for the future, and I won. And as you heard, I spent almost 18 years in the General Assembly. And here's what I learned the first day I got there. I was at the time a 32-year-old black woman from the most Democratic district in the state, in a body that was mostly white Republican men over 50. If I was going to get anything done, I learned very quickly, your life experiences and what you know is what shapes your political views, is what shapes how you view public policy, and for policymakers, it's how you decide how to vote. So I had to very quickly understand what's their perspective. What makes them tick? Where do they come from? What is their perspective, and why do they vote the way that they do? More importantly, I had to be not afraid to share mine, even though it was incredibly different. And by doing that, spending 14 years in the minority, I was still able to pass over 370 pieces of legislation. But here's something else that I learned along the way. As I studied history and as I lived and now made history as the first black woman elected to Congress from Virginia. And it's an important lesson for where we are right now. History is a cycle. And the cycle of American history is a country that was founded on the ideal of a government by, of, and for the people that didn't include all the people. It didn't include me when it was founded. And how do we make that ideal of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness true for everybody? And we've made tremendous progress as a country. And every time we make progress, there's a backlash. And it involves three things. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Propaganda, violence, voter suppression. Whether it's in response to Reconstruction, where my family, the men, gained the right to vote for the first time. It was the propaganda of a lost cause and white supremacy. It was the violence of racial terror lynchings. And it was the voter suppression that stripped people of the right to vote through Jim Crow. In the 60s, we saw the same thing. In response to Barack Obama's election, we saw the same thing. It was different propaganda, birtherism. There was still violence, the Unite the Right rally, and there was voter suppression once the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. We are in that backlash right now. But what has kept the cycle of progress going is we don't give up. Every single time and you remind yourself it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 3 steps forward, 1 step back. 4 steps forward, 1 step back. But you keep making progress. And I'll close with this. My one regret about being in Congress right now, I'm excited to serve with Mark Warner, who I met as a young Democrat, and he was party chair, and never did I imagine that I would be his colleague in the United States Congress. But I'd never got to serve with John Lewis. And John Lewis, in his final words to us, said, democracy is not a state. It is an action that requires every generation to do its part to build the beloved community. Democracy in and of itself is not the point. It's what you do with it. It is building a community where your children have a chance to do better than you did. It is building a community based on love rather than fear and hatred. But every generation, whether you fall down or not, must commit to doing its part and keeping the cycle of progress going. And so I am here first to gain strength and joy from a room full of women. I am here to ask you, don't give up, because our perspective in this government by, of, and for the people is needed now more than ever before. I am here for an easy job, which is to introduce someone who needs no introduction in his own conference. And to say thank you to Senator Warner for everything that he has done through his career of public service to uplift and empower women. Whether it was the women he put in his cabinet, whether I still remember as party chair, every staffer, except maybe one who was part-time, was a woman, who has strong women leading his staff now, and who once a year for 12 years hosts this conference to not only empower women, but ensure that we connect and gain strength from each other. And for that, I want to say thank you and introduce to you the senior senator from the Commonwealth of Virginia, Mark Warner.
Well, you'd think, how many old white guys does it take to turn on a microphone? I do worry at times. Sometimes people get the introduction wrong. And as opposed to saying senior senator, say senior citizen, of which I also qualify. But isn't this young woman remarkable? Truth is, I'm so old. I used to think we met each other or that when she was in high school. I even at one point said 8th grade. She would always correct me and saying it's college. She's not correcting me as much anymore. But one of the great joys of being in politics in Virginia has been watching this incredible woman rise up. She actually married somebody who worked at the Democratic State Party. And to see her accomplishments at every level without ever losing sight of what got her into this field. And I'm going to need a little bit of a dose because Kathy Lewis said, Senator, I got here. I've been so down over the last couple of weeks. And, Jen McClellan gave me this pep talk and I'm feeling better now. We may need to give that additional, although I think that pep talk you just gave us all right now was a part of that. And Kathy, I know I'm disappointed as well that you didn't come up with the idea of political trading cards. But I will give you 10 Marjorie Taylor Greene cards for 1 Jen McClellan card. And that is still not enough. To make a difference. I got some thank yous, and I promise you, I know I'm the only thing standing between you and lunch, so I will not take too much time, but I want to thank Virginia Tech and Hotel Roanoke for a great job again when we do this in Roanoke Valley. I want to thank all of my staff, but particularly Lou Kaderi and Ashley Warren, who make this conference possible every year. They're kind of obsessed about it, and it takes that to have all of these different programs. I want to thank Angie Kim for, I understand, giving a kick-ass keynote address. Thank you, Angie. And I also want to thank all of you who were able to maybe give a little bit for the Feeding Southwest Virginia. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to scoot out fairly quickly after I'm done, and we go over and take those contributions over to Feeding Southwest Virginia. We have so many incredible organizations that help people in tough times, but Hurricane Helene obviously did huge, huge damage to North Carolina, but it also did huge, huge damage to Southwest Virginia. And there are communities that were incredibly hard hit. I mean, one of the great assets in Virginia is something called the Creeper Trail in far southwest. Half of that trail is gone. And your contributions will help make sure some of those folks' Thanksgivings is a little bit better. And Jen gave you all the kind of good reasons to stay in this. I experienced this this last week, some of the frustrations, because there's a whole lot of businesses in Southwest Virginia. After the storm, they apply to the Small Business Administration to get a loan. That's not charity. That's why you pay your taxes. But Small Business Administration had not done their books right and had run out of money. So all of these people who desperately need this loan to keep their business, to get it back up on its feet, get a response that says, you have been approved, subject to when Congress does its job and fills up the bucket. So I got with Tom Tillis, the senator from North Carolina, and we said, this should be a no-brainer. We do this all the time. 99 senators said, let's just let this go. One guy, Rand Paul from Kentucky, stood up and objected. In my mind, that's downright cruel. That had nothing to do with partisanship. Tom Tillis tore him apart for the hypocrisy. But as we think through these challenging times, we need to all be at the barricades. We need to not let these kind of things stop us, because that arc of history, or the steps forward and back, is what still is why this country and why our Commonwealth is worth investing in. And I am so proud of all of you. How many of you, is this your first time? Wow. Wow. Damn, well, I can tell all my old jokes, Jen. I can do the ka-ching, ka-ching line. I will do one quickie just for like old time's sake. Lou, don't get mad at me. Because in my own life, I have failed at everything I've done at one point, except for marriage. Thank you, Lisa, and my 3 strong women daughters. Took my life savings after law school and worked for a couple years and invested in a little energy startup company. 6 weeks, helped that company go totally bankrupt. Went into real estate, failed at that in 6 months. So at 26, 27, I was flat broke, living out of my car, sleeping on my friends' couches. But I got a 3rd try. That was cell phones, and ended up eking out a living. But one of the things that taught me at that point was, if I had not been a white man with an appropriate education, I might not have got 3 shots. And the thing in this country ought to be, everybody, we can't guarantee you success, but we ought to be able to guarantee you a fair shot. And almost everything I've tried to do in politics has been about saying, how do you lift folks up? Because it not only is it morally right, but in Virginia, 52% of the population are women. We're now at about 38% of the population of people of color. If you take that talent and don't let them have their fair shot, then the business enterprise of the Commonwealth of Virginia is never going to be as successful. And that just makes sense. I will finish the story, which is what, I then decided at one point after, doing pretty well in business, I decided I was going to, the Democratic Party chair. I met, wonderful middle schoolers like Jen McClellan. And I decided to run because I got to that stage in life where I thought, I had made some money. And I said, and what really at the end of the day I always had these prepared comments, but when I come into this room, I completely throw them out because you don't want to hear, talking points. But I got to that stage in life, my early 40s. I was blessed with a great family, and had always been interested in politics. And I thought, could I take the plunge? And I thought, well, if I'm on my deathbed And I made 10 times more money than I'd had at that point. I'd already made more money than I ever thought possible. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college, came lower middle class family. Would I be satisfied? So I decided to take the plunge. I do not advise this for future politicians in the room. I ran against the most powerful senior member of the whole Virginia delegation, John Warner. The good news was, my name being Mark Warner, we confused the hell out of most Virginians. And the one story I have out of that campaign was, and with apologies to people like Victoria who've heard this only 1,000 times, but it does have the advantage for not even being a stretch, it's the truth. I had a bumper strip that simply said, Mark, not John. And honest to goodness, I'm campaigning down in Danville one day, and somebody comes up to me, looks at the bumper strip and says, excuse me, sir, is that a biblical reference? No divine intervention. I appropriately got second place. But again, one of the things Jen mentioned about her experience in the legislature, where you got to bring your experience. And the remarkable thing about one of the good things about politics, and I think there is something still special about the Virginia way. John Warner was at the peak of his career, Republican. I was kind of the young punk tech guy. And after he beat me, I reached out, and I so much appreciate this now more than I did then. He took me in, and we built a friendship. And when I ran for governor, and I was governor, when we were doing some of the hardest things, John Warner was there. And he ended up in subsequent races endorsing me, and I had the great honor of speaking at his funeral. Because at the end of the day, one of the things he taught me was, Democrat, Republican are important labels on one level, but at the end of the day, we are Americans and Virginians before we're a member of one party or another. And he was always about, how can we think about Virginia? And Virginia is somebody who, again, I wasn't born here. I grew up in the Midwest, and I moved around. We have this great legacy. Some parts of our history, like Jim Crow, and more particularly, massive resistance, where Virginia went beyond Jim Crow, we should look back on and never forget. And people who want to try to erase that part of our history and make it all sound like the 1950s was this period of total harmony just aren't telling the truth. And we ought to celebrate, so many strong Virginia women. The person who led one of the earliest walkouts of a school was over in Prince Edward County in Farmville, Moton High School, a young woman named Barbara Johns, who was in high school. And the civil rights leaders in the community said, Barbara, it's not the right time. It's not the right time. Well, as our frenemy Doug Wilder sometimes, if it's the right thing, it's always the right time. And she led that walkout, and if they had, and there was a lawsuit, and if they'd not done it by alphabet, it could have been that case. That was part of the case that became Brown versus Board of Education. Or think about, again, and it's not just people of color, but I think about another great story that only came to life, and I've been governor and senator for a long time, about 20 years ago, and that's the story of Katherine Johnson over in Hampton, Virginia, who worked at NASA Langley, and then there was a film called Hidden Figures, which probably many people saw. And when they were sending John Glenn, I believe, or Alan Shepard up into space, she did the math by hand that did all the calculations. And she and some of the other figures are now recognized. Or I think about Angie, when I first met Angie, when she was an entrepreneur, and the fact that she's now turned into an incredible novelist. There's another book coming, or Roanoke's own Beth Macy, who, holds people accountable and in terms of people of power, and frankly exposes the enormous toll that opioids have taken on our community. So much of this is done by strong women. And, as we go into this challenging time, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and as the new president comes in, and I wish him well and pray that he will do the right things and be successful for our country, but I do think we have to acknowledge this first 9 months until Labor Day, buckle up. Because, as again, was it Benjamin Franklin said, it's a democracy if you can keep it. And for all our flaws, it is still the best system, and we still are that country and commonwealth where we can come and make things possible. And one of the other secret sauces, I think that I look around, this crowd and even see, when I first started in Virginia politics, it was mostly this room would be made up of black women and white women. Historic African Americans or white folks who've been here for a while. Virginia is so much richer because the number of first-generation Americans who have come from all over the world to choose America and choose Virginia. I think it's been the secret sauce of our nation. If I think about Northern Virginia, 35% of the tech businesses are first-generation Americans. And the sauce, again, in America, and we see this with people who are now running and now members of Congress, that you can come from anywhere, and once you take that oath as a citizen of America and you accept our laws and our values, you are American. And nothing or no one can take that away. Because the truth is, that's not the case everywhere. Even though what I look like, I could move to France tomorrow, I'm never going to be French. And so we've got to make sure that those values that rise so much beyond kind of the political back and forth, we hold close. And time and again, the people who do that are strong women and girls all over our country. Without the recognition, oftentimes without the acknowledgement, but the Jen McClellans who come in and pass a record amount of legislation because of smart, hard work and dedication is the kind of energy that I see in this room. I'll make 2 or 3 quick points and then I'll get off and let you get lunch. One, I'm chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and one of the things that I feel like my job going forward is going to be to make sure, because I respect all of the people who serve in our military and our veterans, but I also respect all of the men and women who serve our intelligence community who don't get that recognition, and they keep our country safe as well. And part of my job going forward is going to be make sure they can continue to speak truth to power, even if power doesn't want to hear it. And when you start shading intelligence, you end up in a place that's not the kind of America we want. I also think, and I can't think, I was disappointed the vice president didn't win stuff, but I can't think about a campaign where it seemed like there was less real discussion of issues than this last presidential campaign. And there were 2 issues that I've spent a bunch of time on that we have to do more, and Jen and I have talked about this a little bit. One is cost of housing and supply of housing. We did $6 trillion of spending after COVID. We didn't do anything on housing supply. So I got a whole set of ideas about how we can incent more down payment assistance, how we can actually give a tax break so you can live close to where you work, how we can actually try for first-generation, first-time home buyers, allow them to accumulate more equity quicker, because the main reason for the 10-to-1 racial wealth gap in this country between black families and white families is the fact that those black families have not had access to owning a home. where that equity is built up, and you can then borrow against it to get your kid to college or ended up starting a business. We've got to grapple with that, and I've got some ideas there. And we have to push the supply out. Matter of fact, anybody here from Henrico County? Okay. I urge people, Henrico County is doing something really cool. They have taken data centers, which are controversial, and said all the tax revenue for the next 5 years or so is going to go to a housing trust fund. And then they're going to say, if you build affordable housing, what they'll do is they're going to use some of that money to buy the land so that first-time home buyer can buy the house but doesn't have to pay for the land underneath. Cuts the third by a third. No, listen to this. And if they build affordable housing, they will waive all of the sewer connect fees and permitting fees, which accounts for about another $25,000. And then they will also end up having all the regulatory approvals in 9 days. Because one of the things, I say this now, regardless of which party is, we got to make the regulatory process across the whole series of fields a lot easier. And for those of you who are businesswomen in this, you live that firsthand about how just the hassles you've got to go through. We can have appropriate consumer and environmental and other consumer protections without this much bureaucracy, and that ought to be a place we can streamline. A second thing we got to do, and I appreciated what President Biden tried to do on some student debt forgiveness, but what I wish he would have done, or what I'm still pushing for, would be, and we should have done this, right at COVID, as we're spending all this money. We should have said, we are going to refinance all student debt to below 2%. If we'd done that, we wouldn't be picking one group of students over another group of students. But it is, that issue of affordability on higher education, we still got to do more. And the final point, just on some of the top line things I'm going to be looking at, is affordable child care. When child care, where I live up in Alexandria, it's more expensive to send your kid to child care than it is to send your kid to George Mason. And Lord knows if you got 3 kids, what do you do? And we got to think much bolder and broader. I just came from a place where there may be some of the women here from up in Northwest Roanoke, where there was a community that has been, challenged. Edith, is that you? Yes, ma'am. Goodwill has taken what was an old Kmart or Walmart and is completely retro doing it. They put another issue we got is food deserts. They put a grocery there that's got fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, fresh meat in the community. They are also providing a free child care service, an ability for people to get training, get their GED, health care, all under one roof. And I'm so interested in this because, if there's one thing we got, whether you are in urban, rural, black, white, whatever, every community has got an old dilapidated strip center that needs to be revitalized. And the notion of how we can incent childcare, you already got parking, you already got infrastructure. So there are a lot of things we can do, and it's going to be a wild time. I spend a ton of time on artificial intelligence. I probably spent more time on artificial intelligence trying with the big name guys than anyone. I got to quickly acknowledge there is no linear relationship between me spending time on AI and actually getting smarter on AI. But it offers great, great potential, but it also offers some real challenges. So what I ask you, and boy, oh boy, do I love this conference. And thank you again, all of you, for traveling. How many of you are from outside the Roanoke Valley? How many of you from? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Although, let me quickly also say, when I was governor, there was a lot less traffic. What I ask you to go as I close is, these are going to be rocky times, and particularly when it comes to protecting women's reproductive health care, when it comes to not trying to pretend there was this imaginary 1950s where everything was cool and copacetic, where wide swaths of this room wouldn't be even included. I will be, at the barricades. I'll be fighting. We can't do what we did maybe last time, where because I think people are frankly exhausted, where every event turns into hair on fire. We're going to have to pick our fights. And that'll be part of my job and Jen's job, and there are good people in both political parties, I promise you. Matt Gaetz didn't disappear by magic. But there's so much that you could, for all the craziness that sometimes goes on in Washington, that is more than outdone by all the good that's going on in communities all over Virginia and all over America. And so what I implore you, I know I'm preaching to a choir, I hope, one, that you'll come away from this conference maybe meeting someone that you didn't know beforehand. Because when I got involved, there were networks that allowed me, as a business guy, to meet people from around the state. It was almost all guys at that point. But this notion of having that friend that, if you're from Roanoke, that actually, lives in Danville or lives in Culpeper or lives in Hampton Roads, I hope you got a connection there. I hope you also maybe heard something that, gosh, that's pretty cool what they're doing. I want to try it back at home. So I hope that spirit of community engagement and involvement you'll take back. I hope those of you who want will run for office. I respect anybody that runs. I actually think, Jen and I've got a hard job, but I think the hardest job in elective office today in America is being on a school board. And I fear greatly that we are going to so drive people from doing that kind of basic public service, they won't do it anymore. But you don't all have to run for office, but be involved in that community. And then vote. And vote for people who are rational. Vote for people. It's not, and that might even include voting for people that believe in science. And it's hard. And what I ask you, particularly to the younger women here, not Jen, who was, when I met her in primary school, but you got to help. I saw Becky earlier with her, real time. The old media in this world is dead. Newspapers, traditional TV, or if not dead, it is a very small part of the universe. I heard the average age for an MSNBC viewer is 74, for a CNN viewer is 70, for a Fox News viewer is 68. And how we communicate on podcasts and other new streaming services and tools, people like me, I got to learn that, and you got to help me learn that about how we can communicate. Because if we can get our ideas out there, and those ideas ought to be coming from the community up rather than from Washington down, then I have absolute faith. And the thing that gives me the absolute faith is to see on a Saturday like this that 600 or 700 women decided that they would give up part of their day, although you do get free lunch, and a few enlightened men give up part of their day to kind and learn from each other, experience each other, talk about things that might be hard, to show that kind of mutual support. I feel that support in this room. Thank you for giving me the honor of being your senator. Thank you for giving me the honor of hosting this conference. And most importantly, thank you for being here and being part of a great, great community, a great Commonwealth, and a great country. Thank you, everybody. God bless.
All right, as we wrap up, weren't those great talks? I'm telling you, I feel really excited now, and I feel encouraged that in a way I did not feel coming into this conference. So I'm telling you, between Angie Kim, Congresswoman Jen McClellan, Senator Mark Warner, I think we feel better. So, and I think you're going to feel great after lunch too. So, here are the instructions for lunch. I knew y'all would stay in this room until you heard these instructions. Listen, not my first rodeo. One thing, speaking of food, by the way, 1,025 pounds of food is what you all brought here today. So thank you for that. 850 meals. 850 meals. That's what's on their way over to Southwest, Feed Southwest. All right, now, here are your final instructions. Lunch is going to be served. You're going to exit, do my flight attendant thing. Exit the doors in front of you. When you go out, you're going to make a little bit of a left, and all of the lunches will be there, box lunches. Now, for those of you who had special dietary needs, you will pick up your lunches where you registered this morning. So those special meals are located over there. Don't y'all be looking at a regular meal and go picking up the special meals, because, you know, these folks order special meals for a reason. So, all right, okay, I think that's everything. Is that everything, Lou? I think it's everything. Thank you so much for coming. Safe travels. Oh, one more thing. Sorry, it'd be great if they could get good help here, like, you know, I'm making a mistake here. We will be here. All the tables will be up. All the resources will be available. Virginia Tech is going to be looking at your resume if you have interest, and the Women's Health Center, all of that open until 2:30. So thank you so much. Thank you, Becky Freemall, and our online. Thanks for being with us today, and safe travels.